All right. First and foremost, I'm going to say all praises be to Yahweh Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shai Ba'Shem Rakah Kodash. And then I'm going to say double honors to the apostles and then it was a great millstone. And shalom to the sincere elect, teaching the truth and faith and sincerity. Quick topic I want to speak on is based upon the scattering and the Gentiles and just going through the spirit. But of course, there's still people out there who, believe that these Gentiles, which received this word, received salvation, right? There's still people who believe that they are actual heathen. And of course, that even goes into things like Cornelius. There's people who believe just because it says he was of the Italian band that it makes him a heathen. It's quite frankly not true. It's quite frankly not true. He was the fact it says he was a just man which feareth the Lord, and like an angel came to him directly to bring him towards the message of salvation. It's like the guy is clearly not, a heathen. But dudes just don't understand that. And a lot of it has to do with, not understanding the scriptures, not studying, and just quite simply not being, chosen to understand. That's why it's important to pray for understanding, because there's obviously brothers and believers that may have, once struggled with that understanding because, they was outside of the circle, and now through the Spirit, they have that understanding, right? That's why it's important to watch the apostles and elders, a great millstone. But then the point that, like I always make, is the Gentiles, and this is the salvation of the Gentiles, all right? It follows a storyline. And the storyline begins with the 12 tribes of Israel being scattered because, yes, the Gentiles who received salvation, all right, the message of salvation that the Apostle Paul went to and many men of the Lord went to, there were Israelites that was coming back to their heritage and coming back to the knowledge of salvation, man. And that's why I say it follows a storyline. And the point is here, it's a question I asked chat. It says, if the Gentiles follow a storyline as really being scattered Israelites that lost their way and not actually heathen, show how prophetic scriptures and history all line up, including the Old Testament, Apocrypha, and the New Testament, make it all make sense. And the reason why I did that is because, if you read and understand the scriptures, which, to understand is a gift, you will see it's a consistent theme. And then you can see where the theme was birthed in terms of prophecy. You read in Deuteronomy, right? And in the Old Testament law and stuff, you see where it speaks about us being scattered and losing our heritage. But then if you turn back onto the Lord, you shall be essentially brought back into the fold. That's why it follows a storyline. The whole, and that's why Apocrypha is such an important book. Especially when you read in First Maccabees and Second Maccabees and basically first, really the key is First Maccabees and Second Maccabees, and more so. But those two books are important, because you see how under the Greeks, they became Hellenized, and how a lot of Israelites were at the threat of death to discard their heritage, which some chose to do. So when you go into the New Testament, and then you see the tension between the circumcision and the uncircumcision, it was fairly recent history by comparison. about, let's say, like, 150 odd years or what or so. And obviously, those Israelites, like it says in John 7:35, when you go to the dispersed amongst the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles, that word to disperse is diaspora. And the reason why they spoke of that narrative is because, though, there was tensions between both of them, they kind of knew, like in the histories, you know, maybe stories they heard from their grandparents or their grandparents, telling stories from what they heard from their grandparents, and obviously written history and stuff. They knew that there was a group of Israelites under the Greeks that left the ways of the Most High, and they was talking from the standpoint, all right, because they left the ways of the Most High, they're completely gone essentially. But then the Lord, through Paul and Peter and the whole understanding, they understood that no, even amongst them, salvation is open to them if they turn unto the Lord. But before I keep reading this, first scripture I want to get is this: Deuteronomy 4:26. I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that ye shall soon utterly perish from off the land whereunto you go over Jordan to possess it. Ye shall not prolong your days upon it, but shall utterly be destroyed. And the Lord shall scatter you among the nations. All right, let's go into the word scatter here, yeah? It says, Pawataza, right? To dash into pieces. When something is to dash into pieces, it's scattered around. A piece of it might go under the chair. A piece of it might go, go under your TV, and even as if you know, might find pieces, and some pieces are hard to find. So some pieces might blend into your carpet. You know what I mean? Anyway, to dash, shake into pieces, to cast abroad, to disperse, to scatter, to be dispersed, right? Yeah, so let's go on. And the Lord shall scatter you. So this is something that was going to happen in the future among you, the nations. And ye shall be left few in number among the heathen, whither the Lord shall lead you. So the Lord was going to lead us into these other nations. And we shall be left few in number among the heathen. Now, if we're among the heathen, yeah, the first generation among the heathen, they might be there for various reasons. And they will obviously know the heritage of the first generation amongst these heathens for various reasons. But now, mixed being oppressed there, mixed just, being there for like 5 generations, let's say 9 or 10. By the 10th, if that family, I mean, like, it doesn't even have to be the 10th. By like the fourth or fifth, all right, third, fourth, fifth. If that family doesn't preserve their culture and language, yo, that child born is gonna fully immerse themselves in the ways and culture of that heathen people that they're around. You know, because even like in Acts 2, right, it speaks about Jews, devout men under every uh, nation on earth, and then it speaks about Jews from different places, strangers of Rome and Cappadocia and Phrygia and all these places, right? But those were actual Jews of the circumcision who knew their heritage as Israelites but spoke different kind of languages. But think about it. If there was Jews who knew their heritage amongst the heathen that spoke the heathen kind of languages but knew that there was Israelites, it's on the, the, the other spectrum of there equally being other Israelites who lost their way. And it was known though, right? You know, these guys just fully embraced being heathen, man, and now they're far gone. But anyway, let's keep going. It says, and the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and ye shall be left through a number among the heathen, whither the Lord shall lead you. And there you shall serve gods, the work of man's hands. Now, if they're serving a god, are they not? If they're serving a god and they're serving a false god and all of that, are they not? Are they not going into the ways of the heathen? Are they not essentially abandoning their culture as Israelites? Of course, they are, because certain, gods in general, if you follow the false ones, they come with a certain way of being. You know, they come with certain customs and rituals. Even some of the type of clothes you wear. You see, saying certain words and enchantments, it changes up completely. You see, and there you shall serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear nor eat nor smell. Yeah, because you're following a false god, you're going into the way of the heathen. But if from thence thou shalt seek the Lord thy power, thou shalt find him. If thou shalt seek him with all thy heart, with all thy face. When thou art in tribulation and all these things are come upon thee, even in the latter days, so even unto these days right now, there are Israelites scattered amongst the heathen. And that's why us, our brothers in this faith, there's brothers in this ministry that are from various parts of the world, speak various kind of languages, but we've returned to the Lord because we've been gathered together by this word. It says, when thou art in tribulation and these things are come upon thee, even in the latter days, if thou shalt turn to the Lord thy power and shalt be obedient unto his voice. You see? So, let's go on. It says, yes, if we take your proposed premise seriously, that at least some of the people called Gentiles in the New Testament are actually Israelites who had become indistinguishable from the nation through exile, dispersion, assimilation, and loss of identity. And that's exactly what happened. There is a surprisingly coherent biblical storyline because it's the truth. But there's an important distinction. The Bible does not say every Gentile was secretly like an Israelite. Well, of course, I'm talking about the Gentiles that receive salvation. Because there are scriptures that will say a Gentile, like, and like, you know what I'm saying? You obviously know. It says, but there's an important distinction. The Bible does not say every Gentile was secretly Israelite. The New Testament clearly also speaks about generally non-Israelite peoples. Listen, man. Just give the scriptures, man, and stop talking. The stronger argument is prophetic that the lost Israel among nations storyline provides part of the explanation for why Paul can speak about people called Gentiles in ways that echo promises originally made to Israel. Yeah, because these Gentiles that was going to receive the word of salvation are Israelites. Because even before I read that, like another biblical foundation where we always got to understand is this, yeah. Psalms 147 and 19, yeah. This is another biblical foundation and premise.
Psalms 147 and 19. He showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and judgments to Israel. He have not dealt so with any nation, and as for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye the Lord. So that's another biblical foundation you cannot ignore. The biblical foundation that you cannot ignore is that, yo, the context and premise is simply that, these peoples in which the Lord spoke about receiving salvation and whatnot are Israelites because they've received the word. When this word is sent out, it's sent out unto Israel. That's the context and premise. You see? Anyway, let's go. It says, point one, yeah? Is to start with the original prophecy. Israel would be scattered. See what I'm saying? The story begins long before Jesus. Israel was warned that if they broke the covenant, the Most High would scatter them among the nations, make them lose their national security, cause them to live among the people they did not know, and eventually bring them back. I mean, listen, that right there, it summarizes the whole picture. To scatter them amongst the nations. How they get scattered amongst the nations? They got scattered amongst the nations primarily through slavery, going into captivity. When the captivities would sometimes finish, you know, dudes are settled. Dudes are settled. Dudes don't really decide to, move back or whatever it might be. Some may lose their heritage, some may keep it. So that's why even with I believe the Passover, the feast of tabernacles, and I forgot is it Pentecost of first fruits, if I'm not mistaken. Where the 3 times a year, where all of them, all that came to keep these feasts, from wherever they may be, they come back and hold it. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, even this. To think about the time period of Haman, yeah. Haman's time period where the order got sent forth to kill Israelites that were in all 127 provinces of Persia. They was all there. Now, when Persia eventually lost their power, like an influence, to the Greeks, do you think all those in Persia just, you know, all our people in Persia just said, you know what, the Persians have lost their influence, so I'm moving back to the land of Israel? Of course not. Some may have, but for the large part, when you have your family somewhere and you're settled, you know, Jake working a job, Jake driving a forklift. Jake is like, you know what, man, you know what, man, I'm chilling. This is equally how, like now, just an example. You might have a guy from, like, even from a personal example, what I mean, I know of. There's a dude I know, right, man, what I mean, he's from Uganda. This dude, for a period of time, was staying in Australia, what I mean? Dude had an Australian kind of lady, you know, and he was doing his thing. But then, eventually he moved to like a different kind of Asian country, whether it be um, China or Korea. I mean, I ain't gonna give exact country because he's very popular in them regions anyway. And now, guess what? He's in them regions. He's got a mobile woman. You know, he's just kind of had a bunch of kids with her. His kids look so called chinky or whatever it may be. You know, um, they obviously speak that language, and it's like, yo, he's doing his thing because he's over there. He's settled. Now his kids, his son and his daughter, I'm like,
grow up and, you know, like being around those certain groups of people. I might just stay there. And if you give it, like, you know, what I mean, 100 years, you know, his son finding a wife, his daughter finding a husband, and so on and so forth, whatever it may be, that family line down the line might look just totally like, you know, some Moabites, man. But guess what? The root of the seed, especially if you go through his uh line of his son, there's still a bunch of Israelites. They just essentially scattered and lost their way. It says the story begins long before I was shy. Scatter them among the nations, make them lose their national security, cause them to live among the peoples they did not know, and eventually bring them back. Deuteronomy 28 is fundamental to the storyline. The key idea is Israel, disobedience, yeah, the curses, scattering, life among the nations, loss, obscuring of identity, eventual restoration. This is our life, bro. This is important because being among the nations does not necessarily mean ceasing to be biologically descended from Israel, and that's what we always say. Just because they're among the nations, it don't mean like they just stop being Israelites. Duh. You know what I'm saying? Which is why it said that in John 7:35. The Jews said among themselves, whither will he go that we shall not find him? Will he go to the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? And who's the diaspora? Yeah, diaspora. A scattering, dispersion of Israelites among foreign nations of Christians scattered abroad among the Gentiles. All right, which are Israelites, the first, you know, the disciples of first school Christians, you know what I mean, up in Antioch and teach. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's who he was talking about. The scattered amongst them to teach. All right, that's two. The northern kingdom actually disappears into the nations. After Solomon, Israel split into two divided kingdoms. Assyria's conquers the northern kingdom, and the deportations take place. That creates a historical basis for the later concept of the lost 10 tribes. Yeah. And it says, and this wasn't merely a latter Christian invention. Josephus in the first century explicitly says that the two tribes were associated with the Jewish population of his time. The 10 tribes were still beyond the Euphrates and were an enormous multitude. Of course, we know in Second Ezra 13, and just the book of Second Ezra, speak about them going to another line where never mankind dwelt, which was the Americas, man. All right, that is significant bit because Josephus was writing essentially the same broad historical world as the New Testament. So there's already a Jewish, Israelite, which again, the term Jew really explicitly applies to the tribe of Judah, but then it obviously you had the uh, 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 kingdom of Judah, the southern kingdom, which basically included Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Israel scattered eastward as a huge Israelite population remained outside Judea, but guess what? Even at that time, you still had some of the northern kingdom that was amongst the southern kingdom. You know what I mean? The scripture speaks about a lady man called Anna. You know what I mean? She was of the northern kingdom. Tribe of Asher, man. All right. The point three, Hosea gives an extremely important clue. This is where your theory becomes particularly interesting. Hosea is speaking specifically about Israel, Ephraim, not the same generic group of pagans. Right? It says the Mosai gives Hosea's children symbolic names:
it says Laruhama, no mercy, and Loami, not my people. Then comes the astonishing reversal. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea. And in the place where it's said unto them, "You're not my people," there shall be said unto them, "You the children of the living God." And we know the full application and understanding of the scriptures applies to Babylon. That was the main place in which you know we just was just seen as a no people, man. But of course, in the place where it said, "Ye are not my people," there he shall be said, "You the sons of the living God," and that's where this this truth started and begun. But even in the book of Hosea, there's a precept in there. Hosea 8:8, it says, "Israel is swallowed up. Now shall they be among the Gentiles." Let's go into among the Gentiles, right? Goya, right? A foreign nation has Gentile, also figuratively, a troop of animals, flight locusts, Gentile, even nation people. Usually, non-Hebrew people, descendants of Abraham, of Israel, blah, blah, blah. We should find them. We really, no, oh, sorry. Let me go back. Yeah, man, I'm going to have to do a part two on this. Israel is swallowed up. You know what? Let's go into this word, right? To destroy, cover up, devour, eat up, swallow down, engulf, swallow down. You know? Yeah, we just got lost in their ways. Now shall they be among the Gentiles, wearing a vessel, where as a vessel wherein there's no pleasure. And that this scripture, every time I think about it, it makes me think about you know how you got these groups of people, whether it's in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, you know, where they're all a byword, man. You got the groups of people called untouchables and stuff, whereby those Jakes in slavery that came from these places from the west coast of Africa that got shipped into India, Iran, Bangladesh, and they're still persecuted to this day. Because our people have been scattered amongst all different types of peoples and nations, and even as we're scattered, those curses are still attached to them. Them bywords, man. So let's keep going. Then 2:23, Hosea, "I will say to those who are not my people, you are my people." Yeah, because it's like for a time you wasn't seen as the people of the Most High, but guess what? You truly are. So the prophetic sequence is Israel rejected as not my people, scattered eventually, called my people again. Is crucial because Israel can enter a condition in which they are effectively treated as though they are not God's people. But just because they're treated as though they're not God's people, it doesn't mean they ain't the Lord's people. And again, if we go into Maccabees, we see the whole war begin. It's already been brewing, but that's where it was really deep. It was like, yo, at the threat of death, you bowed down. At the threat of death, I didn't bow down. So then you go into the period of, the New Testament and that there was tension between the two groups. Some who felt like, yo, my forefathers died fighting against Greece, but then your forefathers, chose to, bow down, man. And remember, back then, man, there wasn't no Instagram or social media, bro. You know what I mean? So point is, people were very um careful and very informed with history. You know what I'm saying? People was very informed with history and what went on. You know, people always told stories, man, of history. It says 4. Then Paul quotes Hosea when discussing Gentiles. This is probably one of the strongest pieces of evidence for the interpretation you're asking about. Paul writes in Romans 9, I'll call them my people or not my people, and explicitly introduces the passage while discussing a people called from the Gentiles. So you get Hosea, not my people, scattered amongst the nations, restored. Paul, not my people, called God's people, sons of the living God. That doesn't prove that every Gentile was an Israelite. Look, the Gentiles that receive salvation, the word of salvation, are Israelites. But it creates an interesting biblical connection. Paul deliberately applies an Israel restoration prophecy to people he is calling Gentiles. That's exactly how the puzzle your interpretation attempts to solve. 5. Israel was supposed to become as a nation. This is another important part of the prophetic picture. Israel's identity wasn't simply lost geographically. They were repeatedly condemned for becoming like the nations. They adopted foreign gods, customs, and practices, which some of us are still doing to this day. So imagine the historical process. Israelite ancestry, Assyrian, Babylonian dispersion, generations living among foreign populations, intermarriage assimilation, Hebrew identity becomes weaker, religious practices disappear. Eventually, descendants are simply identified by the nation they're living among. In that model, somebody could generally be an Israelite descendant while culturally believing himself to be Greek, Roman, Persian, Egyptian, etc. That makes the prophetic language about Israel being among the nations much more interesting. And that's exactly what we teach here at Great Millstone. You know, hey man, I'm definitely gonna have to come back for a part 2 and do a longer video, and even invite more brothers and we go into it more. So you know what, I'm gonna end with, actually, I think it would be a good precept to end on, because in the second lesson, we're gonna go into the book of Romans and such. James chapter 1 and 1. James, the servant of the Most High and of the Lord Yahushua Hamashiach, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, a greeting. And then again, if you go into the word scattered, diaspora, and we know what that's talking about. So yeah, hey, Khan, just wanted to, start this point. So with that, I'm gonna say all praises be to how about you, Mashah, Bashim Kakulash. Double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Most Until next time, I'm gonna say Shalom.